Hey there, and welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today we're going deep on something I think we all kind of encounter in our lives at some point.
Oh, yeah.
High conflict
Is
personalities.
challenging people.
Yeah, HCPs for short.
Yeah.
And, those folks that just make life a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to explore this today is because we are using as our guide
Yep.
Bill Eddy's book, 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life.
That's a great title.
It is. And, he's not
Right.
just some random person with an opinion.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer. He's a
Yeah.
therapist, and he's a mediator.
Wow.
So he's seen this from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, he's got kind of the triple threat of experience with high conflict personalities.
Yeah. It's a really good perspective on this. And one of the things that
Yeah.
I've found most interesting is he says that we're actually more likely to encounter these HCPs today than in the past.
That is interesting. Why is that?
Well, so he actually kind of breaks it down into a couple of different reasons.
Okay.
And one of them
Wow.
is that, community support systems aren't as strong as they used to be.
Oh, that's true.
Right.
That's true.
We're in an age of individualism.
That's right. Yeah.
Online platforms make it easy for anybody to manipulate how they're perceived.
It's like that old saying, right?
Yeah.
On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Exactly.
But in this case, nobody knows you're an HCP.
Right. Nobody knows you're a high conflict personality.
Yeah.
And then there's the media.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes portray HCPs in a way that's distorted or even glamorized, which can really warp our perceptions of what these personalities really look like in real life.
It's not just like the over-the-top characters we see in movies.
No.
We could be brushing shoulders with them every day and not even know it.
Yeah, you might be working next to one,
Exactly.
dating one.
Or even living with one.
Yeah, in your own family.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, so that's the point, I think, that Eddy really tries to drive home, is that we need to be aware of these personality types in all facets of our life.
Yeah.
Because it can be really draining, and honestly, sometimes it can be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is power in these situations. And, the good news is
Yeah.
Eddy doesn't just leave us with the problem.
Right.
He gives us a framework for understanding and interacting with them in a way that protects ourselves.
I like that it's not just about
Yeah,
labeling people. It's about
exactly.
figuring out how to navigate those relationships.
Right. And, one of the first tools he gives us is the WB method.
The WB method, that sounds like something out of a
Yeah.
Spider-Man comic book.
It does, but it's a great little acronym for remembering the key things to look for when you're trying to figure out if someone is an HCP.
Okay.
It stands for words, emotions, and behavior.
Okay, so kind of like
Yeah.
a web that catches those red flags.
Exactly. So it helps us kind of distinguish between somebody who's just having a bad day versus somebody who consistently exhibits these HCP traits. And the first one, words.
Okay.
Their words tend to be extreme, filled with threats or constant blaming of others.
And I imagine their emotions are probably all over the place.
Yes, you got to think intense, rapidly shifting emotions. You might feel manipulated, overwhelmed, or like you're walking on eggshells around this person.
That's no fun.
No, it's not. And then there's the behavior.
Hey, that's where it gets juicy.
This is where it gets interesting. You might see aggression, consistent boundary violations, a lack of remorse. But the real telltale sign is if these behaviors repeat across different situations and relationships.
Oh, so it's a pattern.
It's a pattern, not just a one-time thing.
Gotcha. So it's not just that one time that they
Right.
had a blow up with somebody at the grocery store or whatever.
Exactly.
It's that they're consistently
Yes.
having these issues.
Yes. And Eddy gives some really compelling real-life examples of this WAB method in action in his book.
Yes, I remember those.
Do you remember the story of Jen,
I do.
who wants to work in television?
Yeah, she meets this
And she meets this charming TV show host, seemingly very friendly, helpful, but then his behavior takes a turn.
Yeah.
And you see the WEB method unfolding in real time.
It's kind of disturbing.
It is,
to watch it happen.
but so useful because we see how it can happen.
His words become manipulative.
Yeah.
His emotions are swinging wildly, and his actions start to cross boundaries.
And he ends up fitting the profile of a narcissist.
It was so clear at the end, like,
Right.
oh,
It's-
this is a narcissist.
That's the value of those real-life stories. It helps you see the WE method in action in everyday situations. It's not just theory, it's practical.
Totally. I think there was another one
Yes.
that I remember that really stuck with me. It was
Oh,
about
yeah, yeah, tell me.
Paul, the reformed prisoner.
Oh, yes, Paul, that's a great story.
Yeah, and he really highlighted how HCPs can be deceptive.
Yeah,
He seems to have turned his life around.
right.
He gets involved with the church community.
And then engages in this manipulative fundraising scheme.
Yeah.
So classic antisocial behavior.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about both of these stories is
Mhm.
the TV show host and Paul.
Mm.
They were both very charming and charismatic
Yeah.
at first,
Yes.
but then as you start to peel back the layers,
Right.
it's like,
Oh, the
no.
mask slips.
Yeah, this is not what it seems to be.
Exactly. So those stories kind of serve as those aha moments,
Yeah.
helping you recognize potential HCPs in your own life.
Yeah.
And that recognition is the first step towards protecting yourself.
Okay, so let's say you've used the WEB method
Right.
and you suspect you might be dealing with an HCP.
Okay.
How do you figure out
Mhm.
what kind of HCP you might be dealing with?
Well, that's where Eddie's breakdown of the 5 HCP types comes in.
Okay.
And he starts with the narcissists.
Okay, the me type.
Exactly. Completely self-absorbed and have an incredible sense of entitlement
Right.
that leads them to exploit others for their own personal gain.
Feed all about them.
All about them.
Gotcha.
And, they also struggle to empathize with others,
Okay.
so they don't really see the harm that they're causing.
I'm thinking about the example of Lance Armstrong
Oh, yeah.
in the book.
That's a great example.
He was an incredibly successful cyclist, but it seemed like there was some potentially narcissistic tendencies
Right.
driving his behavior.
Eddie points to his aggressive and self-serving actions, quick to attack anyone who dared to challenge him, which is pretty typical
Right.
of a narcissist.
Just like the more successful they are, almost the more,
The worse it gets.
the more narcissistic they become.
Yeah, and it's important to note that we're talking about potential examples here.
Right.
Can't diagnose anyone from afar.
Right.
But these examples are really helpful to kind of illustrate the core characteristics
Gotcha.
of each HCP type.
We've got the narcissist.
Yes.
What's next?
Next, we have the borderlines,
Wow.
known for their intense mood swings and their unstable relationships.
Oh, yeah. Those are tough.
They can be tough.
Yeah.
You
You feel like you're walking on eggshells.
You do, because you never know what to expect.
Yeah, what mood you're going to get.
Exactly. And, a lot of their actions stem from this depth fear of abandonment.
Oh, wow.
So they engage in these impulsive and manipulative behaviors to try to keep people close to them.
Oh, so that makes sense.
But, one of the things that Eddie highlights about them is this tendency to see people as all good or all bad.
Oh, so it's not just that.
He calls this splitting,
Okay.
and it can make their relationships incredibly tumultuous.
So their mood's changing, but also like their whole perception of you as a person is changing.
Exactly. One minute you're up on a pedestal, and the next you're public enemy number one.
Wow.
It's a defense mechanism to cope with that fear of abandonment, but it's very damaging to the people around them.
Yeah. And this story
Yeah.
in the book of Tom and Kara
Yeah.
is a great illustration of this.
Yes. It shows just how challenging it can be to be in a relationship with a borderline HCP and how important it is to recognize the early warning signs because it can be hard to escape once you're entangled.
Yeah, especially because,
Yeah.
you can see that Tom really does care for Kara.
Yes.
And he's constantly being pulled into this idealization,
Right.
devaluation cycle.
Exactly. And it takes a huge toll on him.
Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking.
So 2 down, 3 to go.
3 to go.
Let's move on.
All right, let's do it.
What's our next HCP type?
Next up, we have the antisocials.
Okay.
These folks tend to disregard rules and social norms. They engage in manipulative, deceitful behaviors without any remorse.
So they just don't care.
They lack that sense of empathy that makes most of us hesitate before we do something that might hurt others.
It's a scary thought.
It is. And what's fascinating and also incredibly dangerous is that they can be incredibly charming and persuasive.
It's like a superpower.
It is like a superpower.
They're master manipulators.
They are masters of deception. They use their charm to gain your trust, and then they exploit it for their own gain.
And Eddie uses some pretty chilling examples in the book.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy, classic example of a psychopathic, antisocial personality. His crimes were horrific, But what's even more disturbing is how he used his charm and intelligence to manipulate his victims.
I remember reading that he used to pretend to be injured
Yeah.
or helpless.
Yeah, to lure women into his car.
Yeah.
It's terrifying
Yeah.
how easily people were fooled by him.
And then there's Bernie Madoff.
Oh, Bernie Madoff, the mastermind behind one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history.
Billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars stolen from investors, including charities and retirement funds.
It's unbelievable how he pulled that off.
Master manipulator, he used his reputation and connections to create this air of legitimacy, and people were willing to trust him with their life savings.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's not always about like violence or over criminal activity.
No. They can be found in all walks of life, using their charm and manipulation to get what they want. So it's about being aware of those subtle red flags.
Yeah.
The lack of empathy, the disregard for rules, the persuasive charm that masks a deeper agenda.
So we've got to be on the lookout for those wolves in sheep's clothing.
Exactly. Protect yourself and don't fall prey to their manipulations.
So narcissists, borderlines, antisocials.
Yep.
2 more to go.
2 more to go.
Let's
Right. Next up is a group that can be particularly tricky to deal with, the paranoids.
the paranoids.
Yes.
So these are folks that are just like
Well, they're characterized by
really cautious.
a deep distrust of others,
Okay.
and they often see threats where none exist.
So it's more than just being cautious.
It's much more, while everyone experiences suspicion from time to time,
right.
paranoids have this pervasive sense of distrust that colors all of their interactions. They hold grudges, they overreact to perceived slights, and are easily drawn into conflict.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, and we see this, played out in the book with Albert Lassiter.
Oh yeah, the neighbor.
The neighbor.
Who's convinced that?
He's convinced his elderly neighbor is plotting to burglarize his home.
Right, and it just leads him down this...
And it leads him to take some extreme measure.
Yeah, really extreme.
It shows how their distorted perceptions can escalate a situation to a dangerous level.
Yeah, and then there's Monica.
Monica, the coworker,
Right.
who's constantly suspicious of her colleagues and her boss.
And that's interesting because it's just a regular
Yeah.
workplace relationship.
Right, but she interprets every interaction through this lens of distrust,
Right.
which creates a lot of tension and conflict in the workplace.
I imagine it's really hard to reason with these paranoid folks.
It is because their rigid beliefs and their hypersensitivity to any perceived threat makes communication and conflict resolution incredibly challenging.
It's like you're speaking 2 different languages.
Exactly. It can feel like you're speaking different languages. It's incredibly frustrating for everyone involved.
All right, so we got narcissists, borderlines, antisocials, paranoids. That leaves us with one more
More.
HEP type to explore.
Let's do it.
Who are we talking about?
Last but not least, we have the histrionics.
The histrionics.
Yes.
Okay, so these are the folks that are just like...
Well, they're known for their attention-seeking behavior and their dramatic and emotionally volatile personalities.
So they always need to be the center of attention.
Exactly. They crave validation, and they'll often go to great lengths to get it.
Drama follows them everywhere they go.
It seems to. And what's tricky is they often exaggerate their problems.
Oh, really?
So it can be hard to tell if they're genuinely distressed or just putting on a show to get sympathy.
Oh, that's tough.
It is.
You don't know if you should be
Well,
empathizing or
Right.
running for the hills.
Yeah.
So they thrive on that drama.
In a way, yes, they're very emotionally expressive and their feelings tend to be very intense and on the surface.
Right.
But, it's important to remember that behind those dramatic displays, there's often a deep-seated need for love and attention.
So Eddie gives a great example
Yes.
of a histrionic with Amy's mother, Nadine.
Nadine, yes.
Right. And she's just this constant need to be the center of attention. She's got the dramatic outbursts.
Manipulative.
Manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
She's trying to control Amy.
She's a classic example of how they can use their emotions to manipulate others. And, the book also delves into a legal case where a histrionic mother loses custody of her children because she's unable to provide a stable and nurturing environment for them.
Wow. So this isn't just like
No.
a personality quirk.
It's not.
This can have real-world consequences
Exactly.
for these folks and the people around them.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these 5 types.
We do.
Now what?
Well, recognizing them is just the first step. Bill Eddy provides us with some practical strategies for managing our interactions with them.
Oh, good.
And that's what we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
Awesome, because these folks can really throw you for a loop. So having some tools to navigate those encounters
Right.
is going to be super helpful.
Exactly. Interacting with HCPs requires a different approach than how you would handle conflicts with most people.
Right.
Their ingrained patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving demand a more nuanced and strategic response.
Oh,
Buckle up.
okay.
We're about to dive into those strategies for dealing with these challenging individuals
Okay, so we've identified a potential HCP.
using the WEB method.
Right. And
Yeah.
we even might have a sense of what type we're dealing with now.
Right.
Do we just avoid them like the plague?
Well, avoidance can
Right.
work in some situations,
Sure.
but oftentimes these are people we can't simply cut out of our lives.
Right. It could be a coworker or a family member.
Exactly.
Somebody we're in a relationship with.
Yeah. So we need some tools
Yeah.
for dealing with them directly.
Right.
And luckily, Bill Eddy gives us a fantastic strategy called the CARS method.
The CARS method.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we
Think of it as car moving.
a 4-step process?
Okay.
It starts with connect.
Connect. Yeah. That seems counterintuitive.
I know, right?
Shouldn't we be trying to distance ourselves from these difficult personalities?
It's not about agreeing with them or enabling their behavior.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging their perspective, which can actually help de-escalate the situation. You see, HCPs often interpret being ignored or dismissed as a threat, which only makes things worse.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just a little validation goes a long way.
A little validation can go a long way. Even a simple acknowledgement can create a sense of being heard, which can reduce their defensiveness.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's after connect?
After connect is analyze.
To analyze.
This is where you help them explore options and choices.
So instead of telling them what to do,
Right.
we're guiding them.
Exactly. You're empowering them within healthy limits to see that they have agency in the situation.
Gotcha.
This is especially important with HCPs because they often feel powerless and victimized, which fuels their blaming behavior, right? So by helping them see the options,
Yeah.
it's almost like we're subtly
Yeah.
shifting the focus.
You're shifting the focus from blaming others to taking some responsibility.
Okay.
It might be a small shift, but even a small shift can be progress.
I like this CARS method.
Yeah.
So far, so we
Uh-huh.
connect, we analyze, and then what?
Then we respond.
Respond.
This is where Eddy introduces this really helpful concept called BIFF responses.
BIFF responses.
Yeah.
Okay, I like this already.
These are your communications secret weapon when dealing with HCTs.
All right, break it down for me.
BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
Brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
Yes.
I'm sensing a theme here.
It's all about keeping it simple and straightforward.
Yeah.
Right? Addressing any misinformation or hostility without getting sucked into that emotional vortex.
It's like a verbal shield
Yes.
against their drama.
That's a great way to put it. You're giving them the facts.
Yeah.
You're staying calm and ending the conversation before it can escalate.
Right. So instead of getting defensive and arguing back, you're just like, here are the facts, moving on.
Exactly. And what's great about BIFF responses, especially if you're doing this in writing, it creates a record of clear, concise communication.
Oh, that's a good point.
If the situation ever escalates,
You've got that.
you've got documentation.
Paper trail.
Yes.
Okay, I like this. BIFF.
Go in there. All right, ready for the final step?
Yes, bring it on.
The final step is set limits.
Sit limit.
This is about protecting yourself by establishing clear boundaries and disengaging from those unhealthy interactions.
This is key,
And
right?
It is crucial.
Because a lot of times these folks
They will push those boundaries.
push the boundaries.
Yeah. So it's about recognizing that you can't control their behavior,
Oh, okay.
but you can control your own reactions and how much you engage with them.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's say they're constantly calling you late at night to rant,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Been there.
You could set a limit by saying, I'm only available to talk during business hours, or if they're constantly asking you for favors, you could set a limit on how often you're willing to help.
Right. It's about protecting your own well-being
Exactly.
and not letting them just drain you.
Yes, protect your energy and recognize that you deserve respect, and you don't have to tolerate behavior that is hurtful or draining.
That's like a delicate dance.
It is a delicate dance.
Right.
It requires a different skill set than dealing with most people.
You got to be
Okay.
strategic
Well,
and
and sometimes you feel like you're walking on eggshells. details.
Yeah, and just when you think it couldn't get any more complicated,
Right.
Eddie throws in this concept of negative advocates.
Oh, yes, the negative
Who
advocate.
are these people?
These are individuals who, for various reasons, support and enable HCPs, often unknowingly contributing to the damage they cause.
So they're like the HCP's cheerleading squad.
It can feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, they might be misled by the HCP, emotionally hooked by their stories, or even share similar HCP traits themselves.
Oh, so they might
Yeah.
be an HCP and not even know it.
Exactly. And that makes these situations even trickier to navigate because they can amplify the HCP's blaming behavior.
Oh, wow.
They validate those distorted perceptions and can even turn against those who try to hold the HCP accountable.
Oh, it's rough.
It's like they create this echo chamber
Yeah.
where the HCP's version of reality is constantly reinforced.
Right, and Eddie uses the Duke lacrosse case
Oh, yeah.
as a really powerful example of this,
Yeah.
where the group of Duke lacrosse players were falsely accused of sexual assault.
Right. And the accuser in that case had a history of erratic behavior and inconsistencies in her story.
But the district attorney, fueled by his own ambitions
Right.
and maybe some biases,
Yeah.
became this negative advocate
For the accuser.
for the accuser, and he
Yeah.
perpetuated those
I did.
false allegations even when the evidence didn't add up.
And his actions created a media frenzy that severely damaged the reputations of these accused players, even though they were ultimately exonerated.
And it's a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control.
Yes.
When an HCP
Right.
finds a negative advocate,
Finds a champion.
yeah, who's willing to just go to bat for them no matter what.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, it really is.
Well,
So how do you even begin to untangle that?
it can feel overwhelming,
Yeah,
but, it's important to remember that truth and justice do prevail sometimes, even if it takes a long time.
right.
And that's where, seeking support from those who understand HCPs and the dynamics of negative advocacy is so crucial.
So what can somebody do if
Yeah.
they find themselves in that situation?
Bill Eddy really stresses the importance of finding positive advocates,
Okay.
people who are grounded, rational, and can offer a balanced perspective.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive on high conflict personalities.
We have the WE method,
Yeah.
the CARS method, negative advocates, even delved a bit into Eddy's HCP theory.
Yeah, we talked about those 5 HCP types.
Mm-hmm.
The narcissists, borderlines, antisocials, paranoids, and histrionics.
It's a lot to digest.
It is a lot. And now the question that's on everybody's mind is, can these HCPs change?
Yeah.
Can they break free from these ingrained patterns?
Well, the answer is, as with most things related to human behavior, it's complex.
Okay.
Eddy suggests that change is possible, but it's not a quick fix.
So there's hope, but it's...
So there's
wow.
hope. Not going to be easy. But it's a long and winding road.
Right. It requires...
Yeah, it takes a lot of self-awareness, professional help, and a genuine desire to change.
And that's a tough combination.
It can be a really tough combination to achieve. And, he emphasizes that change rarely happens overnight.
Right.
These personality patterns are deeply ingrained. It takes a lot of work to shift those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So they've really got to be willing to kind of dig deep and confront those things.
Absolutely. And Eddy stresses the importance of finding therapists or counselors who are specifically trained in working with high conflict personalities.
Oh, so not just your average therapist.
Not just your average therapist, because traditional therapy approaches may not be effective.
I could see how it could even
And in some cases could even backfire.
make things worse.
Exactly. So it's about finding the right tool for the job.
Right. You wouldn't use a hammer
Right.
to fix a computer.
So it's about finding the right kind of support someone who understands these personalities and knows how to tailor their approach.
Gotcha. So even with professional help, though, Eddy points out that change ultimately depends on the individual's willingness.
It does.
Right.
They have to. They have to be willing to acknowledge their role in conflicts,
Right.
to take responsibility for their actions and commit to the hard work of personal growth.
Which is really difficult
It is incredibly difficult.
for these folks.
And
They often just lack that.
and that's where it gets tricky, because without that initial step of self-reflection,
Self-awareness.
self-awareness, change becomes almost impossible.
So it's all about managing expectations.
Right.
We can't go into this
Yeah, we can't force someone to change.
thinking, oh, this person's going to
Right.
turn over a new leaf.
We can set boundaries. We can offer support. We can try to communicate effectively, but ultimately the choice to change lies with them.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that idea
The
of
self-protection.
self-protection.
Yes.
And we've talked about this throughout the entire deep dive,
Yeah.
about how important it is to recognize these personalities,
Right.
understand their patterns.
To develop strategies for interacting with them.
Yeah, and all of that boils down to protecting yourself.
Exactly. Protecting yourself emotionally and practically. Accepting that you can't control their behavior,
Right.
but you can control your own reactions and how much you choose to engage.
So setting limits, disengaging from unhealthy
So
interactions,
seeking support.
getting support, all of that is
It's essential to self-preservation
right.
when dealing with HCPs.
And sometimes self-protection might even mean removing yourself from the situation entirely.
It might,
Right.
if the relationship is toxic,
Mhm.
damaging, and the HCP is unwilling to change,
Yeah.
walking away might be the healthiest choice.
Yeah. So we've covered some
Yeah.
heavy stuff today.
We have.
It's a lot
It is.
to think about. So what would you say are some key takeaways?
I think the most important takeaway is knowledge is power.
Okay.
Understanding these high conflict personalities, their
Yes.
traits, their patterns, and their potential for change.
Right.
This knowledge empowers you to make informed choices.
Informed choices about how to interact,
Exactly.
how to protect yourself.
How to navigate those challenging relationships.
Yeah. So it's not just about labeling people.
Right.
Right.
It's about becoming a more astute observer of human behavior,
Yeah.
recognizing those red flags, and developing strategies for managing those tricky interpersonal dynamics.
It's about finding that balance
Yes.
between hope and realism,
Absolutely.
between compassion and
And self-preservation.
self-preservation.
I got it.
Well said. Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Could the rise of HCPs in modern society be a reflection of our own struggles with
Mhm.
empathy, accountability, and healthy conflict resolution?
That's a great question.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
And if this deep dive has kind of piqued your interest,
Yeah.
I highly recommend checking out Bill Eddy's book, 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life.
It's a great resource.
It is. And remember, you're not alone in this.
You're not.
There are resources available, people who understand these challenges and strategies that you can use to protect yourself. So until next time, take care and be well.